Welcome, luxury enthusiasts, to the Luxury Travelers Podcast, hosted by Rodney George. The ultimate passport to opulent destinations, extravagant experiences, and unparalleled indulgence. Whether one is a seasoned jet setter or daydreaming of the next lavish getaway, the Luxury Travelers Podcast has it all covered. So buckle up and prepare for a journey into the lap of luxury. Now, your host.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening, whatever time it is when you're finally getting around to watching this episode of the Luxury Travelers Podcast. You know, I have a lot of great guests on here every week, but today is a real pleasure to have with me somebody that probably knows more about exploration travel than anybody that I personally know. He's a part of Signature Travel Network, which is a consortium of travel providers, travel agencies, travel advisors across the country that do somewhere north of $11 billion annually in sales. So I'm thrilled to death to introduce you to my friend Karl Kannstadter, who's the VP of Strategy in the area of exploration. So, Karl, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rodney. It's a pleasure to be here.
So 37 years of experience, and a lot of it's been hiding out at one pole or the other, right?
That's so true. Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it as hiding out, but somebody asked me one time, or somebody suggested one time, you know, a lot of people might think you're running away from something by traveling so much. And I said, no, I'm running towards something. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm running towards something.
You'll know it when you get there.
Exactly.
Well, I'm envious of you because the seventh continent is the only continent I haven't been to, and I tried unsuccessfully a few months ago, and I didn't make it, and we can talk about that later on. But Karl, you've really witnessed an evolution in expedition travel over the recent 5, 7, 10 years, right?
Yeah, things have really changed. You know, thinking about Antarctica, for example, and we got to get you there, Rodney, because it's life-changing. You know, my first time was 22 years ago, and it was aboard she wasn't even retired, a Russian icebreaker. And they are not built to have passengers. They are not built with stabilizers. They're not built for comfort nor speed. They're built for crushing ice. And it was a very, very different experience than the one I had in November of last year, for example, when I took my wife and son on a purpose-built luxury expedition ship with USB-C plugs in the toilet. You know, so that God forbid your phone should run out of power while you're sitting on the john. So you had an outlet there to plug it in. So things have changed dramatically in the last 20 years, but certainly in the last 5 to 7 as well.
Well, you not only do the polar regions, you do a lot of other exciting stuff as well. Tell us about the Fiji dive lodge thing that you were talking about the other day.
Sure. So I used to run a dive lodge in Fiji, the island of Kondavu, which is, I believe it's the 4th largest island in Fiji. Very, very remote, no road system, no real infrastructure to speak of. And we would have to drive the boat about 40 minutes to the little airstrip on that island to pick people up, another 40 minutes to bring them back. And we had a reef right off of our beach, basically. And just some of the most spectacular diving that I've done, and snorkeling. It was so beautiful. And you didn't have to go to any significant depth to do it either. So yeah, I've been fortunate. I've been really blessed to have had a great career in travel and just to have explored the world.
Well, we're calling this episode the Luxurification of Adventure Travel, the intersection, if you will, of comfort and challenge. And I think the USB-C plug was just the tip of the iceberg there. So explain to us what you're talking about when you say the luxurification of adventure travel.
Sure. You know, we talk a lot about luxury, and I think that term gets overused and misused. And because I think a lot of people believe that luxury is necessarily about comfort or about glitz and glam and you know, ostentatious displays of wealth and things like that. But what we're finding in the industry is that there is something to be said about the luxury of place, let's say, or the luxury of access. So your viewers will have heard about, or I suspect some of them will have heard about, trekking with mountain gorillas, in Rwanda, for example. And I'm sure when that started out, it was a pretty rough and tumble and rugged experience. It's still rugged in the sense that you're climbing around in these very wet jungles in Africa, going to look for these groups, these family groups of mountain gorillas. But boy, oh boy, when you get back to the lodge these days, have things ever changed from what it would have been 20 years ago? Very, very simple accommodations, Spartan, not much by way of amenities, that sort of thing. These days, that has changed dramatically. So it's kind of that old adage from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a spin on that. Because it's there, the mountain gorillas, the spectacular scenery, this place at the end of the earth, tourism or tour operators are building the infrastructure, the lodge, the hotel, the cruise ship, to get people there. And it's not always necessarily a luxurious or comfortable experience when you get there. One of our partners, Natural Habitat, for example, they operate in Churchill, Manitoba, a wonderful polar bear experience. And as far as I'm aware, there are no 5-star properties in Churchill, Manitoba. It's, you're kind of at the end of the road there.
Yeah.
Sure enough, comfortable, clean bathroom, clean linens to sleep on, but nobody would say it's luxury. Nobody would say it's 5-star.
Right.
But the experience that those folks provide for your clients, for example, Rodney, who want to go see polar bears in Churchill, it's second to none. And so it's the luxury of being able to get that close to a polar bear and take that award-winning or magazine cover shot of a polar bear.
Somebody sent me a video that just popped up on one of my social media feeds this morning, and it was a tiny polar bear, and he was trying to climb aboard an icebreaker, and they rescued him, and had all these guys holding this polar bear and feeding it. And I said, at what point in time do his natural instincts kick in that he knows he doesn't like these people and wants to eat them then?
When he gets hungry.
Well, that's a good answer.
When he gets hungry. I saw that video, and I hate to burst your bubble, but it's AI.
Is it really?
Someone generated that. Yeah.
Now, how would you know that?
Well, first of all, there wouldn't be a bear cub all alone out there by itself. It would be with its mom. Now, theoretically, I suppose the mother could have been killed or something like that. But how did they get it up the side of the ship? And there are a couple of subtle things there that if you speak to a polar bear biologist, they'll tell you there's
That
nothing.
didn't happen.
That did not happen.
Oh, you bursted my bubble.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so what's the main difference? And you told me this a long time ago, but I want you to share it with our listeners and viewers. What's the main difference between the Arctic and the Antarctic? And you gave me a simple description.
Sure. It's an oversimplification, but I like it. Antarctica is a frozen continent surrounded by oceans. The Arctic is a frozen ocean surrounded by continents. So this notion that we have from childhood that, Santa's workshop is at the North Pole and there's this literal sort of barber shop pole, red and white striped pole at the North Pole, not true. I was there in April of 2015, and the funniest thing I saw was one of those wooden signs, with arrows pointing every which way. And one says, Tokyo, 14,000 miles, New York, 8,000 miles, whatever it is. And it said, the North Pole is here, and was crossed out, and someone had written in was. Because you and I may be standing on the North Pole, and we've got GPSs that say 90 degrees, and we're there, but we're standing on a frozen ice sheet.
Yeah.
And so as the currents and the waves and the winds move things around, that ice sheet moves and it's always moving south, because when we're standing at the North Pole, every direction is south from there. Anyway, the sheet moves south, and all of a sudden we're at 89.999 degrees. We've shifted. So there is no land mass at the North Pole. At the South Pole, in Antarctica, there is a landmass, and it's covered by ice. In some cases, it's up to 3 miles thick.
3 miles.
Yeah, 5 kilometers.
Well, you've been going to the poles for a number of years. What are you noticing for our people who say the sky is falling and, the global warming is melting all the polar ice caps? Is that truly happening? And is it happening at a degree that we should be concerned about?
Things are changing. People that spend a lot of time up there and a lot more time than I do, and particularly in the Arctic, they're noticing the changes different, which is why I think some of the biologists and the scientists prefer the term climate change as opposed to global warming. Because in the Arctic, for example, they're finding ice in places where it shouldn't be, or at times of year when it shouldn't be there. And they're finding spots that should be thick with ice at a certain time of year, and it's not there. So it's changing. It's different than what we used to see. That's certainly, people who spend more time up there than I do, they're in the Arctic, they're noticing those changes. And the wildlife are adapting as a result. The polar bears in particular are very, very adaptable. So they're changing. Their primary food source is seal, and they like to hunt along the ice. Well, when the ice isn't there, they will go on land and they'll find rodents. They'll find moles and voles and lemmings and things like that. And they'll go into big bird colonies and look for eggs. Now, this is not to say that they're not noticing it in Antarctica, but Antarctica is so vast. And as I said, it's a landmass that's covered in ice. It's not as noticeable, and it doesn't appear to be happening as quickly from what I've gathered from some of my friends that work there.
Okay, so for the person that hasn't been to either of the polar regions and they're looking to check a couple of major trips off, what can they expect? I mean, you talk about ice sheets 3.5 miles thick. Obviously, that required a great deal of cold weather to form that. But at the time of year that you actually visit those regions, what can they expect?
Great point. When I used to represent an expedition cruise company that operated ships in Antarctica, they still do, I just don't work for them anymore. And I was in Chicago, for example, in January, making a pitch and showing my slides. I would tell them and I would show them, it's colder right now in Chicago or in Minnesota or in Toronto, where I am, than it is in Antarctica right now. So the season when we travel there, when the expedition ships head there, is November, December, January, and February. It's the summer in Antarctica.
It's their summer, right?
Yeah. And so the temperatures will range from, say, 28 to maybe 36, 38, something like that. There can be high winds, there can be storms, it can snow, it can sleet, it can hail. Under those conditions, then, the captain and the expedition leader, they'll pivot. They'll say, whatever we had, plan A is out the window, we're now going to plan B, plan C, plan D. They won't take you outside, or they won't schedule an exploration or an excursion when the weather's really, really foul. But typically you're going to get that range where it's, say, 4 degrees below freezing, 4 degrees above freezing, something along those lines. And the expedition cruise lines that operate there, they recognize where their clients are coming from. And very often they're coming from the Sun Belt or, the southern parts of the US, and they likely don't have the clothing. So they will provide a parka. And it's typically a 3-in-1 parka. So there's an insulating layer, like a puffy jacket, then a windproof, waterproof layer, like a raincoat that will just go over that. You can wear each one of those layers independently, or you zip them together, and now you've got this pretty heavy parka. They'll all instruct you to use the layering system. So wear long johns, and then an insulating layer, and then the parka or a pair of ski pants or snow pants on top of that. Many of them will provide the boots, and these are not snow boots you had if you had snow boots as a kid. These are made out of neoprene, so wetsuit material, but very, very thick, like 7 mil, 9 mil, with a heavy, heavy rubber base. So they're waterproof and they're insulated, and they're great to about minus 30. You would never, ever experience cold. I took a friend from Brazil to Antarctica 3 years ago. And at the end of it, I asked him, did you feel cold once during this trip? And he didn't.
So there you have it, sports fans. It's safe to come out and join us in the polar regions. Let's get back to the luxury thing for a second, though, because I had a question here. Does luxury always have to be about comfort and service?
No. Again, coming back to my point about it, there being something that I like to call the luxury of access or the luxury of place. I love the outdoors. I live in Toronto, and a couple of hours north of here, we're into literally tens of thousands of lakes. And so my family and I, or my son and I, will go canoeing and camping. Luxury for me is having fresh meat on day 3, on a camping trip. So everyone's definition of luxury is a little bit different. But, using the example of the mountain gorillas, using the example of the polar bears, to have that sort of access to creatures like that, to be that close and have a hot meal and have a warm bed and a clean bathroom that you can use. A lot of people consider that a luxury. It may not be 5-star dining. There may not be turn down service in your bed with a little chocolate on your pillow, but for 5 nights out of your life, you can probably live without, knowing that in exchange for, you probably don't have turn down service at home and a chocolate on your pillow at home either. So
only if I put it there.
Right. Right. So, the trade-off is that you get up in the morning and using Churchill again as an example, you're getting into these tundra buggies, these things with these 6-foot high tires, big knobby tires for driving around on the mud and the ice. And when they park those things, because they've found a couple of polar bears, the polar bears are curious and they slowly make their way over. And believe it or not, we give off a scent. Doesn't matter if everyone showered and put on deodorant that morning, we're giving off a scent that they find interesting. And they'll make their way over and they're sniffing around the base of this vehicle and they're sniffing around the tires. And when I did it, we had just had lunch. They brought a great big, almost like a Gatorade cooler of chili. And they ladled it out and we all had our chili. And there was a German guy with a camera lens. I swear to God, it was 12 inches long. And he and I finished our chili first. And there was a platform on the back of this. It was an old school bus. And he and I stepped onto the back of the platform, or the back of the bus onto this platform, about 6 feet in the air. And this bear was sniffing around. And all of a sudden the bear got up on its hind legs and he put his paws on the railing. And this guy with his camera lens, the camera lens was here and the bear's nose was here. And I was trying to back up as far away as I could on this 4x4 platform so that I could get the photo of the head, the camera, the lens, and the bear's nose and the bear's head. And I couldn't get far enough away. It wasn't in focus. I was too close. So did I have a chocolate on my pillow that night? No. Did I have 5-star dining? No. Was it the best red wine in the world? No, I probably had a beer out of a can. But I wouldn't have traded it for anything because I was in that place at that time and had that experience. So that was a luxury to me.
It was a bragging rights experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are the most exciting things going on in the luxury expedition market right now?
Oh, gosh, there's amazing news that came out of Florida. Space Perspective. So there's a company.
I had her on the show 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Melissa or Adita?
Adita,
yeah.
Yeah.
They're both super passionate about what they do. I'm so excited by what they're doing. And so for those who may not have seen that episode, the Space Perspective are operating out of the Space Coast, and they're using technology that has been around for decades or maybe even centuries, but it's hot air balloon technology, or it's hydrogen balloon, technology, which I know comes with a bit of a stigma attached to it, but it's been used very successfully for taking up cargo loads and I think satellites or low Earth orbit satellites and things like that for decades and decades. And NASA and the Navy and all sorts of organizations have been using this technology. So they have built a capsule that holds 8 people and a pilot. and it slowly rises, I think at 12 miles an hour.
12 miles an hour is what she said.
Yeah. To 100,000 feet over the course of 2 hours. You spend 2 hours at 100,000 feet, and then they slowly descend for 2 hours. So it's a 6-hour experience. You splash down in the ocean, and their custom-built ship is there to pick you up and retrieve the capsule and bring everybody back on board. And you've spent 2 hours at apogee, at 100,000 feet, looking at the curvature of the Earth. And unlike some of the other experiences that people can purchase these days to have a space experience, you don't have to go through astronaut training. You're not going to experience zero G, and you're not strapping yourself to a rocket that's trying to escape Earth's gravity, which is super challenging to do. It's a gentle wafting up. So and they had their second successful test flight, now unmanned thus far, 2 weeks ago. And the other big news in the last few weeks is that Richard Branson, who has his own experience with balloons and holds a number of world records with balloons and balloon travel, is going to co-pilot the first manned flight, which they think will happen next year, 2025.
Yeah, she said late next year. And Sir Richard Branson not only is bringing his co-piloting skills, but he also, I believe, brought his checkbook.
Wonderful. Yeah,
I think he he liked it so much. I think he made an investment.
Oh, so anyway, that's for me, that's the single most exciting thing going on in expedition or exploration travel these days.
Our agency has an advisory board of 9 people who are clients and 3 people who are not clients. And we had our meeting the other night, and one of our clients she's literally been to all 7 continents, all 7 oceans. They travel. I think she's been to 120 countries. And so when she was talking, she was kind of a little bit of, I've been here, I've done that. I said, I've got something tonight that you've never done that you're going to want to do. And so I showed the video. I showed a little bit of our podcast from a couple of weeks ago, and the people in the room were just sitting there with their mouths open. They couldn't believe that for the low price of $125,000, they too could experience the edge of space.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of money, for a relatively short time for that experience. But my goodness, the other ones that are currently being offered are more, and it's a shorter amount of time that you're spending in space. You have to take the astronaut training, et cetera. The way they've put it is, if you can take a cruise or if you can fly in a commercial aircraft, you can do this from a space perspective. So I think it's going to open things up to a lot of people.
And on the other, with your feet still somewhat on the Earth, what's going on in that segment as far as luxury expeditions to the polar regions? I know there's it seems like every few months there's a new expedition class ship coming. So
well, I would say the one that's most exciting to me personally is a custom-built luxury icebreaker. So I mentioned that I had traveled by icebreaker 22 years ago. Yeah, it's almost 23 years ago. But a French company by the name of Ponant, Ponant, they operate in the U.S., but they operate in the polar regions and all over the world. They built a luxury icebreaker built as a cruise ship, so for guests, called the Commandant Charcot, which must have been a French explorer or something along many years ago. And they have done some very interesting things in Antarctica, where they're following the coastline and going much further south than many of the other cruise lines have gone. In the Arctic, they've gone to the North Pole. So they've broken ice all the way to the North Pole. And there's the magnetic North Pole. There's the geomagnetic North Pole. There are something like 3 poles. There's a pole of inaccessibility, which is the furthest point from inhabitation. And I'm drawing a blank on the other. But they've done that. This coming winter in February and March, or January and February, they're going into the frozen St. Lawrence River in search of seals that are pupping on the ice at that time of year. So they're doing some pretty impressive things with that ship. And anyone I've heard from who has experienced that ship says it's just a remarkable experience. The vessel itself, the food. There's an infinity pool at the stern of this ship with a glass railing. So you feel like you're in this glass shoebox maybe, but a swimming pool. And so you're swimming there looking through the glass to the frozen ocean behind you as the ship breaks the ice on its way to the North Pole. So that I find pretty exciting as well.
And then there's Antarctica in particular. They're now flying part of the way there, I believe.
Yeah, there's a South African-based company called White Desert, and there's a U.S.-based company. Most of what they do is logistics for some of the countries that operate research stations in Antarctica who don't have a large enough base, and the base wouldn't have its own landing strip, or they wouldn't have their own Air Force, or not an Air Force equipped with the aircraft needed to land in Antarctica. Many of them will piggyback on the U.S. or piggyback on with the Brits because they have that technology in those aircraft. But a lot of them will work with this company out of the U.S. called ALE, I think Antarctica Logistics, something or other. About 10% of what they do is a commercial tourism venture as well, where they've got a blue ice runway. They fly a special aircraft from the southern tip of South America. They land there. They've got a tented camp set up during the summer months. And the South Africans do something very similar, just to a different part of Antarctica. They will take off from Cape Town, head due south. They've got a blue ice runway set up, and they've set up some geodesic domes. So it's glamping in Antarctica, if you will.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we attempted to fly to King George Island about a year and a half ago, and it was an unsuccessful attempt because King George was fogged in for multiple days in a row. So we're going to go back and try the old traditional thing where you gun it out across the Sir Francis Drake Passage there.
Yep. Take the drugs. That's my advice. If you're even remotely prone to seasickness or motion sickness. Now, having said that, the last time I did it, which ship are you sailing on?
Hasn't been decided yet.
Okay. It was a ship that was newly built. She's only a few years old, state-of-the-art stabilization, and we were going through some pretty rough seas. I think the captain said 8-meter swells. So, that's in the neighborhood of 25 feet.
Yeah.
And I was up on the 10th deck because normally you want to be low near the water level and avoid all of this motion, be close to the center of gravity. And I hadn't taken any seasick meds, and we made it across the Drake, and I was fine. And normally I'm susceptible to it. November was my 8th trip to Antarctica, and I'm still susceptible to it. But on that particular ship, it was extremely comfortable.
Well, the ships have stabilizers, and they're faster ships than a few years ago, so they can get across in 36 to 40 hours as opposed to 2.5 or 3 days. So that makes a difference.
And the Drake has a reputation, an undeserved reputation, because, if you go on YouTube and you search Drake Passage, you're going to see something horrific.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that gets a lot of views. It's dramatic, right? If it bleeds, it leads kind of thing.
Yeah.
If someone shot a video of the Drake Passage when it was flat calm, when it was glass, which it can be, I've done it. No one's going to watch that video.
Yeah.
It's not interesting. So, you talk to some people, and I heard one guy who works for an expedition cruise line, and he's the head of their expedition department. And he put it this way: it's either the Drake Lake, the Drake Shake, or the Drake Quake. And it's about 30% of the time it's the lake, 40% of the time it's the shake, and 30% of the time it's the quake. The lake, mirror calm, flat, nothing to concern yourself with. They can go full speed and get across in 36 hours or less. The shake is what you would expect, riding the high seas anywhere in the world.
Right.
And the quake is only 30% of the time, and they avoid it. The captain or the expedition leader will look at the weather before leaving South America or before leaving Antarctica to head back to South America. They'll look at the weather. They'll put it up on the monitors around the ship and say, hey, folks, if we leave when we were scheduled to leave, which is 12 hours from now, we're going to bump into that big swirling purple mass on the map, and we don't want to do that. So we're actually going to have to leave a little bit early, or we're going to leave a little bit late. We're going to let that blow through and come in after it. So they have ways of mitigating that. And like I said, if you're even remotely prone, if you get seasick in the bathtub, take the drugs. It's not your mom's, anti-nausea medication that just knocked you out and made everybody sleep through it these days. The new medications are really, really good, and the ship's doctor will have them. Or to be absolutely sure, speak to your physician before you go.
Right. I tell you, we went to, when we were in Vegas last week at the conference, we went a couple of days early to see the Eagles at the Sphere, and there's so much going on in there. You almost need motion sickness medications in there just to watch the show. I mean, I don't know if you made it over there and saw it or not, but it was absolutely, I can't tell you how many times I've seen the Eagles. I've seen them 3 times this year, but to see them in that environment was the most phenomenal concert I've ever been to. And I've been to hundreds of concerts in my lifetime.
Yeah, the Sphere is a really bizarre experience. I've seen a film there. I haven't seen a concert yet, but yeah, you feel like you're going to fall over the edge. There's almost a sense of vertigo that you get at certain points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Karl, we're going to have to wrap up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being on the show. Got folks out there watching this. This is an incredible multi-generational opportunity to travel to the polar regions or the Galapagos or wherever you seek adventure in an expedition type mode. So we really appreciate you being here and sharing your incredible knowledge of those regions of the world with us. And just remember, as you go on your way, folks, enjoy yourself, because it truly is later than you think. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rodney.
Thanks for joining us on the Luxury Travelers Podcast. For more information, head on over to luxurytravelerspodcast.com to connect with our team or leave us a message. Until next time, safe travels and savor the extraordinary.